that we should begin. This is, of course, the last session of this extremely stimulating and fascinating conference, and it's devoted to the same theme that the whole conference has been devoted to, but in a more personal way. And the actual topic of the round table is the Jewish left and activism, Jewish left-wing activism and family links. I'll introduce our three speakers, who will each speak for between 15 and 20 minutes, and then we'll be able to have a discussion. The first speaker is Eva Herbst. She's the project leader of the project Together, which deals with Polish Jewish history in the 19th and 20th century and the dialogue around the different problems that it raises. In 2017, she published a book of poems, Document Podróży, which she originally wrote in 1969 and 1971 after she was expelled from Poland as a result of the events of March 1968. Poldek, or Leopold Sobel, was born in Warsaw and after matriculation emigrated to Israel, where he served in the IDF and studied history at Tel Aviv and Leeds University. He worked in the Ministry of Defense as a translator, and as I'm sure all of you know, he's the editor of Plotkes, the internet publication for the March 1968 generation, on which he wrote an important book, Marzec 68, Przyczyny I Następstwa. Final speaker is David Slutsky. He's written widely on the aftermath of the Holocaust. He's an assistant professor in the Yashchik Arnold Jewish Studies program at the College of Charleston, and has written an important memoir, Sing This at My Funeral, a memoir of fathers and sons, which I think will be the topic of his presentation today. He's also written on the International Jewish Labor Bund after 1945, on the Holocaust and the third generation, and a book which hasn't yet emerged, which I'm quite curious to read, Laughter After, Humor in the Holocaust, which is co-edited with Gabby Finder, who also lives in the Charlottesville area, and Avinoam Pat. So we have three very stimulating presentations, and I'll ask Eva Herbst to speak first.
I'm going to speak from the lectern. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to be here and to speak to you. I'm going to talk about Herman Diamant. Herman Diamant was and I'm going to speak in Polish. I don't know if anybody needs a translation, because I'm going to quote some letters of Herman Diamant, and those are in Polish, and I felt that it would be appropriate to do it in his native language. Herman Diamant, starszy brat mojego dziadka. Aha, tutaj trzeba coś z tym zrobić. O. Herman Diamant, starszy brat mojego dziadka, urodził się 30 marca 1860 roku w Lwowie w zamożnej żydowskiej rodzinie kupieckiej. Jego ojciec, Jakub Maurycy Diamant, prowadził założoną przez siebie firmę z materiałami budowlanymi razem z żoną Betty z domu Holender. Był on również świetnym skrzypkiem, zapraszanym, by grywał w różnych kwartetach, oraz mecenasem sztuki wspomagającym młode talenty. Maurycy i Betty mieli 6 dzieci, 3 synów i 3 córki. Wszystkim synom dali wyższe wykształcenie. Najstarszy, Bernard, był inżynierem chemikiem, Herman prawnikiem, a najmłodszy z rodzeństwa, Aleksander, mój dziadek, miał prawie ukończone studia medyczne na Uniwersytecie Jagiellońskim, gdy zdecydował, że nie może brać na siebie takiej odpowiedzialności za cudze życie i nie przystąpił do ostatniego egzaminu. Po powrocie do Lwowa pomagał Hermanowi w prowadzeniu firmy, którą ten musiał przejąć po śmierci ojca, a później przejął ją całkowicie, żeby Herman mógł zająć się adwokaturą i działalnością polityczną. Ich ojciec, Maurycy Diamant, był człowiekiem religijnym i tradycyjnym. Ich matka już mniej. Pomimo że w domu była kuchnia koszerna, pozwalała jeść chłopcom szynkę, ale z papierka, nie z talerza ze względu na ojca. Był to też dom o tradycjach patriotycznych i postępowych. Herman pamiętał z wczesnego dzieciństwa, jak u jego matki zbierały się panie, by robić szarpie dla rannych w powstaniu 1863 roku. Jego ojciec, podobnie też jak ojciec jego żony, Maurycy Lazarus, brał udział w wiośnie ludów w 1848 roku. Maurycy Diamant był przeciwnikiem heder-ów i próbował reformować szkolnictwo. Zorganizował przy Kachale, czyli gminie żydowskiej, komitet szkolny i założył nową szkołę, w której chłopcy oprócz religii uczyli się też innych przedmiotów. Razem z komitetem szkolnym opracował też reformę heder-ów, którą należało przedstawić Zgromadzeniu Żydów w Bożnicy. Musiał to zrobić przedstawiciel wnioskodawcy, a nie sam wnioskodawca. Ojciec wybrał Hermana do tego celu. Herman był już po barmictwie i miał prawa dorosłego mężczyzny. Zgromadzenie ortodoksyjnych Żydów propozycji nie przyjęło i zaczęło ciskać Hermana pantoflami, pod gradem których uciekł z Bożnicy. Było to jego pierwsze publiczne wystąpienie. Według artykułu Herman Diamant, a sprawa żydowska w Robotniku z 7 kwietnia 1930 roku, cytuję, już w czasach szkolnych należał do założycieli Stowarzyszenia Syjon w Lwowie. Sionizm ówczesny był to gorący protest rwący się z głębi szlachetnych dusz, krzyk buntu przeciwko sponiewieraniu i skarleniu godności ludzkiej Żydów. Koniec cytatu. Pod koniec lat 80. XIX wieku nawiązuje kontakt z grupą robotników i studentów, którzy pod kierunkiem byłego powstańca styczniowego, drukarza Antoniego Mańkowskiego, są zalążkiem rodzącego się ruchu socjalistycznego w Lwowie. Diamant wchodzi w skład redakcji dwutygodnika Robotnik, którego wydawcą jest Mańkowski. Herman Diamant jest współzałożycielem Galicyjskiej Partii Robotniczej w 1890 roku i Galicyjskiej Partii Socjaldemokratycznej w 1892, która 5 lat później staje się Polską Partią Socjalno-Demokratyczną Galicji i Śląska Cieszyńskiego. Ma dużo wrażliwości dla innych i ważnym jest nadmienienie, że walczył, by ta zmiana nazwy partii z galicyjskiej na polską nie miała miejsca, dopóki Rusini, czyli Ukraińcy, nie stworzą własnej partii. O jego wrażliwości na losy innych, która zapewne miała duży wpływ na jego drogę do socjalizmu, może świadczyć fragment listu do przyszłej żony, towarzyszki partyjnej Herminy Sydonii Lazarus z 11 kwietnia 1896 roku, w którym tak opisuje scenę w sądzie w Czerniowcach, gdzie odbywał praktykę sądową. Cytat. Przed kilkoma dniami znowu byłem świadkiem sceny wzruszającej do głębi. Cygan o śniadej twarzy, kruczych włosach i rzewnych niebieskich oczach, znoszący męczeńsko śledztwo o kradzież, rozmawiał w mojej obecności z żoną, z daleka przybyłą, aby go zobaczyć. Malowała kobieta barwnymi, żywymi słowy nędzę i biedę w domu panującą. Cygan słucha, ani się nie ruszy, tylko tak żałośnie, tak boleśnie patrzy, że mi trudno zostać spokojnym i ukryć wzruszenie. Najchętniej bym go uścisnął, pocieszył, dodał otuchy, żeby tylko tak nie patrzył. Zdaje mi się, że nie można by myśleć straszniejszej kary dla tych wszystkich, na których spada wina za całą nędzę świata, niż żeby te istoty, dla których jeszcze czuć umieją, patrzały na nich jak mój biedny cygan. To wszystko męczy mię i dręczy, stracę kiedy władzę nad sobą i ucieknę stąd niespodzianie w nocy i nikt się nie dowie dokąd. Gdzieś hen daleko, gdzie ludzie mieszkają. 2 ludzi znam, którzy zdaje mi się potrafią odczuć stany mojej duszy. Ignacy i wy. Hermina była córką Maurycego Lazarusa, dyrektora Galicyjskiego Banku Hipotecznego i wielkiego filantropa, który później ufundował szpital żydowski w Lwowie. Zarówno ona, jak i młodsze siostry Eleonora i Fryderyka były pod wpływem idei socjalistycznych już od czasów szkolnych na pensji niedziałkowskiej. Rodzice nie zgodzili się na ślub Herminy ze znanym socjalistą. Matka chyba była nawet bardziej przeciwna niż ojciec, gdyż obawiała się pewnie, że młodsze córki nie będą mogły znaleźć dobrej partii. Hermina zaręczyła się bez zgody rodziców i zrzekła się majątku. Ślub odbył się w styczniu 1899 roku. 10 lat później młodsza siostra Herminy, Eleonora, wyszła za mąż za młodszego brata Hermana, Aleksandra. Dom Diamantów stał się według Stanisława Lewensteina na długie lata punktem centralnym ruchu lwowskiego, któż bowiem nie przewinął się w owych latach dumnych wzlotów i burzliwych zawiei przez gościnny Dom Diamantów. Piłsudski, Jotko, Sulkiewicz i tylu innych korzystali długimi tygodniami ze schroniska u towarzysza Hermana, którego mądrej rady zasięgano w niezliczonych sprawach trudnych związanych z taktyką socjalizmu w zaborze rosyjskim. Piłsudski nazywany był przez dzieci Diamantów obcaszek, gdyż nie wyjawiono im jego prawdziwego nazwiska. Nie będę mówić o szczegółach długiej, ponad 40-letniej działalności Hermana Diamanda, bo 15 minut na to nie wystarczy. Podam tylko kilka zasadniczych faktów z jego życia. W 1904 roku zostaje delegatem Polskiej Partii Socjalno-Demokratycznej do Międzynarodowego Biura Socjalistycznego, gdzie reprezentuje nie tylko PPSD, ale i Polską Partię Socjalistyczną obu innych zaborów i gdzie pozostaje z krótkimi przerwami do końca życia. Jest tam głęboko zaangażowany w zdobyciu poparcia europejskich przywódców socjalistycznych dla sprawy niepodległości Polski. Od 1907 do 1918 roku jest posłem z Lwowa do Austriackiej Rady Państwa, czyli parlamentu, i bardzo prędko wyrabia sobie opinię czołowego eksperta w sprawach ekonomicznych. W grudniu 1918 roku jest powołany do Polskiej Komisji Likwidacyjnej. Po odzyskaniu przez Polskę niepodległości jest z ramienia PPS posłem na Sejm w latach 1919-1930, członkiem Rady Naczelnej PPS w latach 1931, jej wiceprzewodniczącym w latach 1924-28 i przewodniczącym od 1928 do śmierci w 1931. Reprezentuje Polskę w międzynarodowych misjach dyplomatycznych, między innymi w negocjacjach gospodarczych z Niemcami po I wojnie światowej. Jego wysiłki dyplomatyczne mają zdecydowany wpływ na zapewnienie Polsce miejsca w Radzie Ligi Narodów. Herman Diamant pozostawił ogromną ilość listów do żony, do której pisał ze swoich ustawicznych podróży. Dzielił się z nią swoimi myślami, opowiadał o dyskusjach, pracach partyjnych czy misjach rządowych. Większość swego życia spędził poza swoim lwowskim domem, czy to w parlamencie austriackim we Wiedniu, czy w Sejmie w Warszawie, czy też reprezentując partię lub kraj na arenie międzynarodowej. Po jego śmierci Hermina wydała książkę Pamiętnik Hermana Diamanda zebrany z wyjątków listów do żony. Zacytuję urywki z kilku z nich. Berlin, 5 stycznia 1925. W Niemczech unicestwiają demokrację komuniści. Wraz z nimi lewica i centrum mają ogromną większość. Przeciw nim jej nie ma, więc i środek ciężkości przenoszą na prawo. Centrum niechętnie pójdzie z prawicą, ale skoro inaczej rząd powstać nie będzie mógł, to poskromi swój i tak skromny zapał republikański. Berlin, 15 października 1926. Tryb życia mego krzywdzi ciebie i mnie. Czuję to teraz bardziej niż kiedykolwiek, ale niedobrowolnie to czynię. Gdy piszesz, że trudno beze mnie, szarpię się bardziej, ale niczego nowego nie wymyślam. Lwów, 11 września 1930 roku. Z listu do syna o Brześciu. Z gazet wiesz, co się u nas dzieje. Byliśmy psychicznie przygotowani na takie rzeczy. Nie wiem, czy losowali kogo uwięzić, czy też jest w tym jakiś system, ale nie ulega wątpliwości, że między uwięzionymi są najbardziej zasłużeni około odbudowania państwa. I teraz list pisany do więźniów z Brześcia z 1931 roku, wysłany na ręce posła Ciołkosza. Cytuję. Tyle podłości wobec tych, którzy tworzyli rdzeń walczących o wyzwolenie narodu, wierząc, że wolność państwa jest sumą jego obywateli. Jaka straszna pomyłka. Gdzież jest nasza Polska? Polska wolności, honoru, szlachetności, czci obywatelskiej? Czy rzeczywiście czasem po odbudowaniu państwa, po urzeczywistnieniu marzeń, kwiatu ludzkości, danem było dożycie faktów, które krzyczą w niebogłosy: myliliście się, ulegliście strasznemu złudzeniu? Wierzę, że praca pójdzie dalej. Praca ciężka i żmudna i ofiarna i że przyjdzie czas wymarzony i utęskniony, że sprawdzą się przepowiednie o społeczeństwie szlachetnym, wolnym, miłującym i szanującym się wzajemnie. Koniec cytatu. Zmarł niedługo potem, 26 lutego 1931 roku. Zaraz po powrocie do Lwowa z posiedzenia Międzynarodowego Biura Socjalistycznego w Zurychu. W rezultacie marca 1968 zakończyła się polska historia potomków Diamandów i Lazarusów. Zamyka ją mój tomik wspomnień i wierszy z tamtego okresu pod tytułem Dokument podróży. Moją rolą dzisiaj jest nie dopuścić do zapomnienia o tych ludziach, którzy tyle włożyli w historię Polski.
Well, thank you very much for this very moving speech, and I can't help but comment on the last two letters of Herman Diamant. I myself wrote about what happened in Brześć. I think that when we talk about how wonderful Pilsudski is, we also need to remember that it was Pilsudski who arrested the people, put them in Brześć, where they were brutally treated in an appalling manner, as Herman Diamant correctly pointed out in these moving letters. And this is really the essence of what was the noble characteristics of the PPS and of Polish socialism. The second speaker, as I already mentioned, is Poldek Sobel, and I'll ask him now to take the floor.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to apologize because in your programs is Alex Sobel as well. He is engaged in elections in Britain. He's fighting for his position in the party, in the Labour Party. So the elections are in 3 days. He said, I'm not coming, sorry. But he gave me, I had an interview with him, and I have quite a lot of information. My paper deals with a question whether a seed that was planted in pre-war Poland in 1929 gave a seed that actually can change something in this world. Let's start with my father. Oh. Hello. I know that it will not work. No, that's it. My father, who was born in 1909 in Lwów, in a family that I don't know anything. My father never spoke very much about his parents and his sister and brother. His sister survived the war, but not the rest of the family. He was educated in a vocational Jewish college called Kurkis as a driver and car mechanic. He started his working life as a driver to a very rich Jew who at one point owned 5 or 6 houses at Rothschild Boulevard in Tel Aviv. So he wasn't a poor man. But my father, in 1929, joined the transport union in Lwów and started to be very active in this union. I'll say a few things about this union. It was a union that united drivers and porters and coachmen, Balagula, together in a bond defending their positions, the economic position and social position. My father was a speaker of Polish, Ukrainian, German, stroke Yiddish, so he was a recruiter. He started his activities as a recruiter, but very soon he became the secretary of the branch and then treasurer of the branch. He was also active in MOP, in help to the revolutionary Spain, China, and involved in many industrial actions and 1st of May actions, and spent quite a lot of time locked up so that he doesn't cause any trouble. He was acquainted with various activists in Lwów. He knew Wanda Wasilewska, for instance. But also he was active in the Front Jednolity, which was a kind of Polish variety of Popular Front. During the 1939 war in the eastern part of Poland, he was taken a prisoner of war by the Soviets, but on the basis of the fact that he was active in MOP, they knew, they had documents. He was released and started to work in MOP. Explained what it is? Oh, everybody knows. MOP, Międzynarodna Organizacja Pomocy Rewolucjonierom. In Polish it's Międzynarodowa Organizacja Pomocy Rewolucjonistom. Started to work in the system of transport in Lwów. When the war with Germany started, he was mobilized, and as a lieutenant, this is his picture. We didn't have any pictures from before the war. It all went. This is the first picture from 1941. And then he took part in the war as a person looking after the cart transport of an Air Force division in the fronts in Northern Caucasus, in Stalingrad, etc. I have 2 pictures from this period. He's the one in the middle with mustache. Yeah. He was wounded during these actions in the area of Stalingrad on the other side of the river, but it's just details. And he also joined the Communist Party. At that time, there was a so-called Stalingrad recruitment drive to the Communist Party, and officers did not refuse to join the Communist Party. It wasn't done. Obviously, the fact that he was a member of Bund was delicately not mentioned in his documents, so it will come later. After he left the military hospital, he was appointed head of Autoinspekcja, it's a kind of traffic police, in this town of Sumy in the Ukraine, where the Polish First Army was formed. So if they learned, they sort of, as an expert of car transport, etc., he was transferred to the Polish army, and he was in command of one of the transport battalions. And he came to Poland in 1944-45, already in Polish uniform. This is one of the early pictures of him in Polish uniform. After the war, he was in command of a car repair facility, first in Prague, in Wola, in Warsaw, and then in Krzyki in Wrocław. I was born in 1946. I was the only child. My parents married before the war, and my mother survived the war as well. My father took her with him when they were going east. In 1949, one beautiful day, it was a Sunday, somebody knocked on the door, they entered, and my father was arrested. Until today, it's not clear why he was arrested, because I took the file from IPN. It's also not made, it's not clear. He was, the short sentence that I could get from the prosecutor office was that he was against PPR and PZPR. He wasn't obviously negative anything, because he wasn't active politically. He was repairing cars. It was his job. But I remember my childhood as long journeys, and we lived the kind of lie for me that where is Dad? Dad is in Moscow studying communism. And I was going on a train with my mother to visit him in prison, first in Mokotów and then in Wronki. This was kind of a madhouse, but it was part of my life. And my family decided that because his position was unclear and they had Soviet experience, what happened to people in prisons in Soviet Union, so I was adopted by my uncle and aunt, so that I go with them to Israel. In 1950-51, there was a possibility of going to Israel, but in the end they didn't go because they had to pay some taxes and they didn't have money, and they stayed, and so I didn't go, but I went through the process of being adopted. So I had two families in the end. Well, comes 1953, he's released from prison. They said, you are a good boy, we don't want anything bad to happen to you. He became a lieutenant colonel, and he got a very good job in, forgot what is this office called, developing Polish industry. He was engaged in developing Polish motorcar industry. He was organizing production of various cars, motorcycles, etc. In Szczecin, building Junak motorcycles. In Jelcz, also some kind of cars. And in the end, he became the managing director in uniform in a military factory in Nysa. And he introduced in Nysa the production of delivery vans and mini buses. He was decorated. He made a hero of socialist labor. Come, I think, 62, there was what was in Polish called Akcja Odrzydzania, and he was released from the army because they said he's very bad health. He was okay all the time that he was working before. He lost his military position. He was retired at the age of 49. And then, for various reasons I'll talk later, I left Poland in 1964 after I finished my secondary school, and I went to Israel. This is me in Israel. My time in Israel was not long. I spent 9 years, but I'll come to that a little bit later. My father was engaged in a kind of voluntary work after he retired. Among very many other things, he was the secretary of the regional party organization in Saskakempa. And who lived in Saskakempa? Gomulka and his wife. And they were actually members of this branch of the Communist Party, where my father was a secretary, and he was coming from all these party meetings, and telling us jokes about Gomulka's wife. That was his hobby. But it's just an anecdote. When March 68 came, my father was called to the place not far from here, Pałac Mostowski, and showed this picture. Because a few years before, I sent it to my parents as a proof that I went to the army. I was very proud. It was first this. They had the picture and they said, comrade, your son is an aggressor. We cannot pay you pension anymore. And part of his retirement pension was taken away, and my father had no choice but to go to Israel. Basically, well, obviously my mother was from a different position. She wasn't a Bundist. My mother was in Lvov organization of Shomer HaTzair, and she was going to Israel all the time. She was buying things to go to Israel, etc. And the normal conversation with my father, every time she bought something new, she said, you are buying things to go to Israel. Ben Gurion is already cleaning the red carpet for you. And obviously, it wasn't a happy emigration to Israel, but luckily enough, my father had a very good profession. And he was immediately recruited to Tel HaShomer military vehicles repair facility, where they repair tanks that come from the front line. And after the 73 war, he was he got a medal, etc. He was doing really good job because he knew what he's doing. Basically, half of his unit were ex-Polish officers who emigrated to Israel because of the anti-Semitic events in Poland. It's crazy. It's that actually Israel was happily receiving what Poland didn't want. And, well, my father died in 1986, but he was a broken man. Why? Because he loved Poland. He was all the time trying to go back to Poland, although, as we know, there were no diplomatic relations, etc. After he retired, he went to Vienna for a few weeks, and every day he was going to the Polish embassy and asking for the visa. And every day they were throwing him out. He came, and a few months later he died, broken, completely. This is my dad. Now it's me. I was born in, as I said, in 1946, and I must say that as quite a little child, I was quite, as far as I remember, quite engaged in political things. What does it mean? I knew, I read about the heroes of the Soviet Union. I knew who was Rokossovsky, who was Malinovsky. I knew it all, and I was very proud of it, because as we discussed with my comrade Baker, we were children of the people that won the war. We were feeling that when we were playing outside with the Polish kids, we were the winners, we beat them. Because our parents were the members of the Red Army, of the Labor Army, etc., and we were actually quite aware of that. But in 1956, I started to realize that something in the system, apart from that I didn't forget about my father in prison and all that. I knew that there was something there. But also, I was witnessing things that around my father, who was at the time the manager, director of the NISA work, there is something not quite as they say in the newspapers. I remember snippets, kind of recollections, like for instance, we were once talking to the regional boss of the Communist Party about supply of sausages, very important subject in Polish economy. And he said, we don't need to increase prices for sausage for the working people. We just take one type of sausage, call it something else, and then it costs 5 zlotys more. I said, but it's cheating. They said, shh. And I have seen the strikes and various other things that were quite unnerving for a young person. Also, I was quite aware of the possibility of immigration to Israel. I'm not going quite deeply into that, but I was aware of Zionism and the push to Zionism, because both my mother and my aunt were in Shomer HaTzair, and my uncle, her husband of the sister of my, was a revisionist, so it was even worse. So come my 18th birthday, a week later I went to the Israeli embassy, and 3 months later I was in Israel. What I did, I thought that I'll go to university, etc., but it was all stories. I went to the army, and after the 6-day war, I went to university. And this is where my political activity started. I took a course in history and philosophy, and one of the lectures we went with my Chaver Baker was the young Marx, taught by a professor from Warsaw University, Professor Henryk Rosen, and the next year, no, it was young Hegelians in the first year, and in the second year, young Marx. And the people that were sitting around the table with us at the seminar started to organize a party. There were people that came from kibbutzim, from various kibbutzim, from Gan Shmuel, for instance, Cohen, not all that, Ran Cohen, who became later a minister of education, I think, in the Barak government, and various other people that were actively politically engaged, like Meir Pa'il, and we were supported by Shulamit Aloni, Uri Avineri, etc. It was a party that we called Siach. Siach in Hebrew means a little plant, but also small Israeli Hadash, the new Israeli left. And I was active for about 4 or 5 years until I went to England. I don't want to go, it wasn't a big party. We had maybe 500 members, 600 members both in Jerusalem and Tel Aviv, and some in some kibbutzim, but it was quite interesting, and we did quite a lot of noise. The first happening we had a week after the Soviet invasion of Czechoslovakia. There was a big event in the Hofer, in the beach of Tel Aviv. Then we had an action to defend play by Hanoch Levin, Malkat Ambatia, in the Kamer. It was a very anti-war play that actually the government forced the theater to take it off. Something reminding us about what happened in Warsaw. A little bit earlier, then there was demonstrations against Golda Meir, who forbade Nahum Goldman, the head of the Jewish World Organization, to go and talk to Nasser. She just said, don't go. And there was a chance of some kind of contact. And we also supported the Black Panthers in Jerusalem. It was a movement to defend the rights of the Oriental Jews. Well, I just left later to England to do my PhD, so they sort of disappeared as a party, but lots of people were very active later on in various other parties. And one of the important things that happened before I went to do my PhD in England was that I met a friend of mine who he's called Leon Svard. Probably many of you know about David Svard, the communist poet from one of the leaders of TSKZ. His son was a friend of mine, and he was married to the daughter of Zygmunt Bauman. And just a week or two before I went, I met Leon in the street in Ramat Gan, and he said, I said, what are you doing? I said, I'm going to Leeds to do my PhD. He said, my father-in-law lives in Leeds. Do you want his telephone number? I said, well, why not? And when we came to Leeds, I phoned, and Zygmunt Bauman answered. I didn't know him. And I explained that I have his number by Leon. Gave me, he said, did you have a lunch? I said, no. He said, take your wife, your car, and come for lunch. And since then, for 45 years, every time I went to Leeds, I had lunch with Zygmunt. It was a very, very close friendship. This is our last picture together. And I was, this is Zwischenruf. Strangely enough, in this conference, nobody spoke about Zygmunt Bauman, who was very, very important to all that. Okay, my son, I have 5 minutes. My son was born in 1975, and he joined the Labour Party in 1997. He told me why he went, he became, as a student, very interested in politics, but he thought that being interested in politics is not enough. He had to join a party. He obviously had to join the party that was mostly anti-racist and fought for the rights of everybody. The Labour Party became his home. He stood many times to be elected as a councillor in Leeds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 7 times he failed. He was standing 7 times before he got elected in 2012 as a councillor from an area of Leeds where there is a small, about 3,000 Jews live there, and for about 60,000 people, about 20,000 people. And I was then joining Alex to talk to all these Jewish people because he said, oh, you know how to talk to the Jews much better than I do. So I joined the Labour Party as well. Not that I support everything that happens there, but because my son asked me to do it. And I do it quite happily. Now, at the moment, Alex is standing for the second time because he was elected in the last election, so in 2017, as a member of parliament for Leeds. Sorry? Leeds. Sorry. For Leeds Northwest. It's a constituency where there is quite a lot of immigrant and student population, so they are quite likely to vote Labour, but we don't know because Labour became very unpopular party, considered anti-Semitic, considered mad to the left, etc. But I hope that he will get elected because it's first of all another Labour MP, the second that I think that Alex is a really good MP. Well, I think there is only one thing I want to add, that my grandchildren, this is Alex, acting politically. And this is my grandchildren visiting Zygmunt Bauman, and as you can see, that Jakob is fascinating. He was fascinated by Zygmunt, and Zygmunt talked to him in a way that it's incredibly interesting how there, and obviously Zygmunt is dead now, what, 2.5 years, but Jakob remembers, and he's waiting another 4 years to join the Labour Party. And I'm going in 3 days' time to canvass for my son, and I hope that I'll meet those Jews that will say to me, no pasaran.
Well, thank you very much, 3 generations. Well, the third speaker is David Slutsky. Yeah. Okay, yes, please.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you very much to the organisers for putting together this panel and the conference. It's been really stimulating, and I've had really an amazing couple of days. And really, it's incredibly meaningful for me to be talking here. All 3 of my 4 grandparents were born and raised in Warsaw. My Zeta Isaac, just around the corner at Pavia 49, Pavia 49 in 1917. He was a communist, son of a Bundist. His wife, my Buba Manya, born on the other side of the river in Praga in 1922, who was the daughter of a modern Orthodox parents, but herself went to Hashomer Tza'ir, and who I'm going to talk about today, my Zayda Jakob Slutsky, born maybe on this street, maybe a block away on Świętojańska 18, I mean, you know, where the streets actually are in relation to where he grew up, I don't know, but I wandered by there and thought maybe it's close to where he grew up. So it's a huge honor to be able to talk in Warsaw. But I'm going to talk briefly about today's, my book that just came out, and here's my plug for the book. Get it out of the way quickly. It's in the bookstore if you want a copy. I've signed them, which tells the story of 5 generations of men in my family, mainly 3. And it's really in some ways a story of the Jewish 20th century, but a story that hasn't been told nearly enough, or a set of stories at least, that haven't been told enough. The story is one about loss and absence, about the relationships between fathers and sons, and about what it means to lose one's father too early. It's a work of history and memory, an imperfect account of a Jewish family over the course of the 20th century. And like all our memories, it's incomplete and fragmented and deeply flawed. I'm just going to grab the clicker. So it's a story that is, I would say, both ordinary and extraordinary, remarkable and mundane. It's a family who got by, endured hardships, and came out the other side, forever haunted by the ghosts of the past. And it tells of, as I said, aspects of the 20th century experience that we really don't know enough about yet. So today I'm going to give just some brief contours of the story, and then if I have a few minutes at the end, I'll sort of reflect on what it means to be a professional historian and a memoirist and kind of merge those two things together. So, and these are my grandparents and my dad in Melbourne in about 1952 by the look of it. So my Zeta, Jakob Slutsky, was born in, as I said, in Warsaw, around the corner from here, in 1901. He saw really the worst excesses of the 20th century. Here, does this have a pointer? That would be exciting. Yes, that's him. About 15 years old, I would say. He was orphaned during the Great War. His father, who was a shoemaker who had a stall in a town square somewhere, was beaten to death by occupying German soldiers in 1916, incidentally on the 19th of April. Maybe I'll come back to that. 2 years later, his mother died after trying to self-abort a pregnancy from a forced remarriage. And I mean, you know, it's heartbreaking and sobering and incredibly timely to think about that story. At about the age of 16 or 17, we don't exactly know when, he moved to the small city of Włocławek, about 200 kilometers northwest of here, where he joined the local branch of the Jewish Labour Bund, which he'd adhere to really for the rest of his life. He died a verbrannter Bundist, a really sort of rusted on Bundist. Here he is sometime during the Polish-Soviet War, in his Polish military uniform, looking very dashing, and the family mythology, and I don't know if it's true or not, is that he was very energized by the Bolshevik Revolution and tried to get to the other side and didn't make it in time. Now, this is like a story that gets passed down, and partly there's really no way for me to verify it or not, so I always give that caveat, but it's a cool story nonetheless. In Włocławek, he married another party member, the same age as him, Gitel Wiśniewska, who was the founder of the local Zukunft branch in Włocławek. Together, they raised two sons, Shmulek, over there, Shmulek and Chaimek. Shmulek showed great promise in school. He was a member of the branch of SCIF, the Bundes Children's Organization, and Zeta held a lot of hopes in his two sons. So we don't know a lot about Zeta's childhood or really even his life in Włocławek, and I actually was there 2 days ago, and sorry if you're from Włocławek, but it's kind of a strange place, at least for an Australian Jew to go back to. We really only know fragments, but what we do know is when the Germans occupied Włocławek, they had a decision to make, like all Polish Jews, to stay or to flee to the east. And they grappled with the decision and initially decided to remain in Włocławek. They thought it was too dangerous if they went to the Soviet Union. But after about a month of the occupation, a little over a month, they decided together that Zeta, as a Bundist and a member of the Bund Council in Włocławek, was vulnerable and in danger, so decided that he should flee. He wanted to take the whole family, but together they decided that it was too difficult and they thought too dangerous, so he fled to the Soviet Union on the 22nd of November 1939 at 6:30 in the morning. He said goodbye to Gitel, Shmulek and Chaim for the last time. He lived for a little while by Lviv and then moved on to Sambor. In June 1940, he tried to return to Poland to his family, and at the border he was arrested, and refusing to take Soviet citizenship was sent to Siberia, where he spent the rest of the war, initially in a small deportee camp in a little town called Minor, which I don't think even exists on a map anymore, about 2,000 kilometers beyond Yakutsk. And then after Operation Barbarossa, he spent the remainder of the war in Yakutsk. In the meantime, his wife and sons were crammed into a small ghetto in Włocławek, and on the 27th of April 1942, they were rounded up, transported to the nearby Chelmno extermination camp and gassed in mobile gas vans, their bodies burnt to ash and probably buried or scattered. He didn't find out until the middle of 1944 when he received news from a friend who had survived. And at that time he began his journey back to Poland, spending the last 2 years in the Soviet Union in Saratov, where he married my grandmother, Eda Fertig, a young woman from Starysonch, 22 years his junior. They returned to Poland in July 1946, passing through Kielce about a week before the pogrom, you know, in one of those kind of there but for the grace of God moments. I should have more slides here. Here he is in Yakutsk with this man who I don't know who he is but looks uncannily like Ben Kingsley. And here's my Zeta. If we ever make the movie of this, you know who will play that guy. Here he is with my grandmother in Engels, and after they returned finally to Wrocław in July 1946. Now he returns to Wrocław and really is kind of initially earnest about rebuilding Jewish life in Poland. He's very attached to this place, particularly as a Bundist, so he joins the local Bund committee. He represents the Bund committee on the local Voivodische committee, and his hopes are pretty quickly dashed. My Buba never wanted to stay in Poland. You know, they had a pretty close brush with violent anti-Semitism on their way through, and my Zeta by then was 46 and pretty battered and broken. Oh, no, I'm not there yet. Don't get too excited yet. So they leave Poland finally in January 1948, and at the time my grandmother was pregnant with my dad. In March 1948, she gives birth to the first of a new generation, and my Zeta had kind of ambivalent feelings about being a father again, although he wanted to regenerate, but he really didn't know how to do that. They named my father, with his cute little tushy there, Shmulek. The family story is that probably after my Zeta's father, but I mean, we all know that it was after Shmulek who was killed by the Nazis. I mean, deep down, we know that. So this is a burden my father carried the rest of his life. In February 1950, they make their way to Australia. They board a ship in Genoa after 2 years in Paris, where my Zeta had a cousin, and they arrive in Australia. I'll talk about that in a sec. They arrive in Australia in March 1950, where my grandparents lived for the rest of their lives. And it was the longest Zeta lived in any one place in Melbourne for his whole life. So a lot of this book is based on these, as a quick aside, these letters that I found that my Zeta had written to his brother in the United States between 1946 and 1978. And it's a remarkable cache of about 40 letters, all in Yiddish. Every page looks like this, so you can see the pages are crammed with words. The handwriting is thankfully very neat and legible, and my Zeta was an incredibly eloquent writer for someone who really had no formal training or education in the humanities or liberal arts. He was an accountant by trade, but as someone commented to me when I read some of this in a talk in Wrocław the other day, like, his writing is just magnificent. So I actually hope to publish some more of the letters in a volume later. Okay. Here's the landing card for my grandmother. And what's really amazing about it is this little bit here that says proposed length of stay forever. And I mean, you know, after a decade, 11 years of wandering, this was like a remarkable revelation for them to be able to say, we're putting down permanent roots in this place. So what happens when they land in Melbourne? Well, they move into this tiny little Victorian workers' cottage in the inner urban immigrant neighbourhood of North Carlton, 501 Canning Street, there it is up there. And their home becomes this amazing hub of socialist Jewish life in Melbourne. My Zayda, as I said earlier, remains faithful to his movement until the very end. So, you know, their house was open to everyone, Jewish immigrants, non-Jewish immigrants, Australian working class people from the neighbourhood. Every Sunday it would be full of people with my bubba walking around with plates of herring on rye bread and everyone drinking a toast to the revolution. Always still a toast to the revolution, and this is like 1960s Australia. That's not imminent, needless to say. You know, it was tough for Zayda. He'd lost his family, and the torments of the past were never far from the surface, even though he maintained some kind of idealism. Here's how he deteriorated just between 1938 and 1946. I mean, he's aged at least 20 years because of the war. He lost all his teeth because he had scurvy. And so those last 25 years of his life were really a struggle. He worked 16 to 18 hours a day. He took nachas in his children, but really found it hard, you know, speaking of the history of emotions, he really found it hard to find joy in life, except that he had this thirst to actually live longer. Here he is here they are in their workshop in North Carlton. Oh no, I can't believe that photo didn't work, bugger. When Zayda died in 1978, on the 27th of November 1978, 39 years to the day after saying goodbye to his first family, my father was 30, and the blow for him was very crushing. At Zayda's funeral, the hundreds who gathered sang the Bundest anthem, Die Schwur, the oath, honouring Zayda's lifelong commitment to the movement, to the Mishpacha, really, the Bundesmishpacha. And whenever my father and I would sing the Schwur together, and this is another part of the story, maybe we can talk about it during questions. When my father and I sang the Schwur, he would always remind me that they sang it, that hundreds of people sang it at his father's funeral. This was always a kind of, like a badge of honor, having lots of people at your funeral, like a sign that you mattered, you were worth something. The last time Dad said it to me, and I wish I could show you the photo, was on the 26th of December 2015, where we were attending an event to honor the Bund's legacy in New York City. And the photo I have here is literally of me and my dad singing the Schwur together. I took a selfie because I thought it was cool that we were in New York singing the Schwur together. We didn't know at the time that 3 days later he would be dead, and 8 days after that we would indeed be singing it at his graveside, just as he had sang it by his father's mitzvah 30 years earlier. So, you know, obviously we're talking nearly 4 years ago, and the shock is still raw. And this is a sort of tradition in my family now, fathers dying too young, a kind of terrifying tradition for me. So, you know, I sort of told this story in a linear way, and the truth is it's not so linear, and the way I tell it in the book doesn't follow a neat path. It's uneven, and this is a challenge for all historians writing on any topic. Like all historians, I'm invested in the people about whom I write, and I try to tell their stories as faithfully as I can. But as a memoirist, I face a whole lot of other challenges. To write a memoir and to tell one's own story raises a whole lot of other questions. There are other sensitivities about what to include and exclude. This is, you know, questions about how much to write about my grieving mother, for example, in a way that I wouldn't do with subjects that I'm writing about who are alive 50 years ago. Moreover, the story is overwhelmingly shaped by grief still today. So there's not any simple answers. The story's not neat, it's not redemptive, and it can't be. Our memories aren't linear, and the way the memories are passed down are fragmented and complicated. But I think that this, the story of my Zeta and his life and his relationship to my father are this remarkable story of resilience, but also some of the kind of complicated aspects of the Jewish 20th century and how politics and history and memory are kind of interwoven constantly. So I'll leave it there, and thank you all for listening.
Well, thank you very much. I think it's often not realized that how many Polish Jews went to Melbourne and what a major center Melbourne was of Bundism. Of course, one of the people who is important in establishing this museum is a Melbourner, Irene Pletka.
I wrote about her father in my first book.
Well, that's very good, yes. Anyway, we have a little bit of time for questions and comments, please.
Polku, po 52 latach znajomości chcę cię zapytać pytanie, które wtedy właściwie nie myślałem o tym. Przyjechałem w 1967 roku, myśmy się poznali, w 1964. Poznaliśmy się na uniwersytecie, faktycznie na tych seminariach, o których wspomniałeś. I teraz ja pamiętam bardzo dobrze ludzi z Polski, którzy przyjeżdżali w latach 60., szczególnie po 1967 roku. Ja już byłem tym watikiem, przyjechałem w 1957. To powiedz mi, jak to się stało, że przyjechałeś w okresie takiej narodowej euforii, w tym okresie, po sześciodniowej wojnie, ty byłeś trochę wcześniej, ale nieważne. I poczekaj, skończę. Zawsze mnie przerwałeś, więc... Więc jak to się stało, że stało się znowuż the Jew, the leftist w Izraelu? Wytłumacz mi. Bo ten Sijach to była taka goszystowska grupa.
Ja odpowiem po polsku, jak on mi zadał po polsku pytanie. Ja przyjechałem, jakby to powiedzieć, zupełnie sam. Ja nie przyjechałem jako część niczego, prócz tego, że ja byłem naprawdę głęboko przekonany co do mojej przyszłości syjonistycznej. Opowiem taki tutaj szczegół, że jak się wyjeżdżało, to ktoś musiał napisać rekomendacje i podpisać na tym formularzu na paszport. Ja poszedłem, znaczy pracodawca czy coś w tym rodzaju. Ja poszedłem do dyrektora szkoły, ja chodziłem do 47 na Międzyborskiej i wtedy dyrektorem szkoły był Szeptycki. Ludzie z Polski wiedzą, co to znaczy to nazwisko, ale on był bardzo zaangażowanym komunistą i on ja przed tym jakieś kilka tygodni wygrałem konkurs na taką olimpiadę historyczną wiadomości o dwudziestoleciu Polski Ludowej. Ja wygrałem szkolne i dzielnicowe i przegrałem dopiero na ogólnowarszawskich, wygrał Henryk Rubinstein, teraz w Göteborgu. I on mówi, no tak, ale ja myślałem, że ty jesteś tak zaangażowany, że będziesz budować socjalizm w Polsce. Ja mówię, panie dyrektorze, ja będę budował socjalizm, ale u siebie w Izraelu. Także może to odpowiada w jakiś sposób. Nie? Ja naprawdę byłem, przekonanym syjonistą, wiesz, tak? Nie, oczywiście ja nie byłem, słuchaj, oczywiście, że ja byłem, ja nie mogłem jakoś się nawet nie pomyślałem, że mogę, wejść do struktury Rakach czy Maki, ale wtedy akurat, jeżeli pamiętasz, była straszna awantura, że się połączyło MAPA i MAPAM. I ja też, jak miałem kolegów, którzy byli młodzieżowym ruchu i tak dalej, i oni wszyscy uciekali stamtąd. I później zaraz poszedłem do wojska. W wojsku ja miałem naprawdę inne problemy niż polityka. I jak wyszedłem, to uniwersytet i bodajże pierwsza osoba, którą spotkałem, był Ran Cohen, który był pułkownikiem komandosów i organizatorem partii Nowej Lewicy. Tak? To już ci odpowiada?
First of all, thank you very much. I wanted to ask David if you can, well, the tradition of Bund as a family, the affiliation to the Bund as some kind of family tradition is well known. And as one of the last Bundists in the world today, no, just kidding, the youngest. Well, it's kind of interesting. How is it like feel to still be a part of this historic movement that unfortunately it's less and less in power those days?
Right. I mean, never in power, I guess, is partly, yeah, but this is me just being a stickler. I mean, it's like a title. Professionally, I've resisted identifying, and in some ways I'm kind of ambivalent about that term, Bundist, to describe myself. Only because, you know, I mean, I live right now in Charleston, South Carolina. There is no Bund, needless to say, in South Carolina. So what is the Bund? What is being a Bundist without a Bund? And then moreover, like, what does it mean without Yiddish? Like, I speak Yiddish, but not every day, and mainly just to my wife to complain about people in the street. So it's not, you know, I guess the answer is I'm just not sure. It's part of what I grapple with. I grapple with it in the book because partly it is about the historical legacy and what does it mean to inherit that historical legacy. And partly, you know, we're about to move back to Melbourne and there is still a SCIF organisation in Melbourne. And I'm going to send my son turns 8 in March and it's just the right age for him to start at SCIF. So he's going to be like the next generation SCIFist. And, you know, partly I get a huge amount of nachas thinking about that. I mean, the idea that my son will go to SCIF like I did and my dad and my Zeta's first sons, I mean, it's like a mind trip to think about. But I don't know what it means in the bigger picture. You know, it's like, like you say, it's like this Mishpacha-Dictate, this legacy, but does it change the world? Probably not.
Okay. I'll hand the microphone up.
Actually, I have it.
Okay.
Okay, so, well, David, I was very struck in your talk. Well, by many things, it was an extremely powerful story, and the same goes for the other two presenters. But I was also very interested, you know, you ended off talking about how in Melbourne, you know, the socialists would get together and toast the revolution, right? But obviously they'd run away from one revolution. And so what I wonder is, and also for Mr. Sobel's characters, you know, your father, the protagonist of your story, how did they relate to Soviet communism? Where did they see that existing in this socialist or communist worldview that they had?
Well, it's very difficult for me to say exactly what my father thought, but he was an officer of the Polish army. He wasn't political in this, but he was a very responsible, very devoted officer, and he was not criticizing Soviet Union for sure, because basically, he survived. He knew that the entire family, the second day of the war, in 1941, he came to collect his father, his mother, and his siblings with a lorry and said, "Come with me." And they said, "Crazy. We are waiting for the good Germans that they will come and give us back all our possessions, etc., from these hooligan Soviets." And he said, no, they will kill you. And they said, we know the Germans were here in the First World War, and it's okay. He came back, there was nobody. And he knew that actually being faithful to not criticizing the Soviet Union was part of his building. I don't know whether you know that there were plenty of people that I was meeting in Bat Yam who thought exactly the same. That they were survived. My theory is that me and quite a lot of people of my generations, we are all miracles that are alive, and this miracle happened only because Soviet Union won the war. If Germany won the war, we will all not be born because our parents would be killed.
My Zeta was anti-communist, although he was in the left of the Bund, and two very quick anecdotes to illustrate why it's a bit complicated. The first is that his brother was a communist, not a Stalinist, but he was in the US and he was a communist. And they didn't see each other for 28 years, and when they reunited in Los Angeles in 1959, at the airport, within minutes of reuniting, they were arguing about the 22 points and the Comintern. So, that lasted. And the other reason I think it's complicated is my dad was also a Bundist, and but he was like of the new left generation. He went to university in 1966, 67. So he sent money to the Viet Cong during the Vietnam War, when the Bundists in Melbourne were in favour of Australian participation in the Vietnam War. So, it's kind of a complicated story as well, how that anti-communism, actually operates.
I have to short at this point, I'm afraid. I would like to say that Karen spoke last night about emotions. What we saw today are the emotions which lay behind the different branches of socialism as it emerged in the Polish lands, the PPS, the Bund, the Communist Party, and there was a deep emotional bond of all the people who were in these movements to these movements, and what we saw today is also the tragic end of these movements. All of these stories are about how these movements didn't succeed on the Polish lands, and at one level the rise of populism is the result of the failure of these movements. The reason I'm cutting the discussion short is because we do have a film at 6:30, and I've asked Yvonne Kleinman of Halle University to sum up the 2 very intense days of discussion, and so I'll ask her to come up to the platform and to give us her thoughts about the significance and meaning of what we've been talking about. Yvonne Kleinman.
Just to warn you, I was asked to do this 1 hour ago, so be careful about what I'm saying. And so as everyone here, I couldn't listen to all the papers because of the 2 panels parallelly happening. So what I'm saying is just impressions from the papers I've heard and interaction in the panels. On my own background, I started or founded the Alexander Brückner Center for Polish Studies in 2013. It's an interdisciplinary center, and it's a center for Polish studies. So it's not a center for Jewish studies, but in our work, Jewish studies are regarded as an integral part. So, and I did research on Russian Jewish history as well as Polish Jewish history. So this is my background. As a point of departure, in planning the conference, we started, I think, with Jewish leftists, and then someone commented, so Jewish leftists, but what about self-perceptions? So are they Jewish, are they leftist, or are they leftists of Jewish origin? So the title of the conference became rather complicated, as you've seen in the result. I think the question that accompanied us was still how to define Jewishness. And another question was how to turn to a topic that is part of heated political debates and stereotypes into a subject of scholarly analysis. And so I will just describe the most impressive outcomes of the conference, and it's my personal selection. Starting from the end, we heard the family history, listened to the family history of Eva Herbst, and she mentioned, or she was focusing on Hermann Diamant. And what struck me in her presentation, but also in other presentations, that he acted as a socialist representative for not only one, but the three partitions of Poland, which means that we have to consider that this conference was not only about 19th and 20th century Poland, but also about Russia, Prussia, and the Habsburg Empire, which means that we should pay attention to transnational aspects and just look at our heroes or historical, personal, to be put in various contexts that were relevant to them. Second point about Jewishness. I think the most fruitful approaches in the conference were one of them, pluralization. In the paper of Katarzyna Chmielewska was a formulation, there were various ways of Jewishness. So this means already from generation to generation, there were various or different perceptions of what is Jewish. Which brings me to the second point, it's historization. So various identifications of Jewishness over time. And the first, perhaps the most obvious one, is religion. We also discussed in one panel whether it's religion or rather spirituality, whether religion is the correct notion to describe what it meant for people. So one identification is spirituality. Second was Jewishness as an outcome of hostile circumstances. And another one was the national movement, Zionism, or various aspects of Zionism. So when we looked at various people in different times, I think that was the most fruitful approach to talk concretely about Jewishness. Another point is how we dealt with the biographical approach. And I think it was very helpful when the life of people was put into a concrete context, as Hermann Rubinroth into the birth control movement in the interwar period. That was in the paper by Sylwia Kuszma-Markowska. I was struck by the quote, "To the Jews, one can write the plain truth without compromise." So she found out that there were specific Jewish life circumstances and mentality, and that's why Rubinroth started within agitating for birth control within the Jewish population, and only later reached out to the Catholic population. One more point is about intersectionality. We had several examples, like as Hermann Rubinroth, as a Jewish doctor in the interwar period, but we could also see him in the context of broader Polish society as a doctor or a Polish doctor or part of the educated elite. And in another paper by Vasily Shchedrin that dealt with Solomon Michols, and he said that the way he acted or the place he picked we can see a fusion of Jewish art and Soviet ideology. So I think it's important to look at these people as Jews, but also as communists or as medical doctors. And I think most intriguing paper at the end was the one by Magdalena Grabowska on Edwarda Orłowska. And it's quite intriguing because when preparing the conference, we had 3 proposals on Edwarda Orłowska. So she really seems to be a key figure to talk about this question of biography and politics. And Magdalena Grabowska presented her as a communist activist, politician, and she put a question mark behind feminist. And I think, so she was quite decided about rejecting the notion of feminism. And her argument was that it should be rejected because Orłowska herself did not perceive herself in her time as a feminist. And this brings me back to the notion of Jewishness, because if we say that the notion of feminism should be rejected, so should, in this case, the notion of Jewishness should also be rejected. So this is an open question to me. And perhaps last, about the neglected aspects that were raised in this conference, I had the honor to chair a panel on religiosity or spirituality of leftists, and in this case really self-perceived as Jewish leftists. The Agudat, the Poilin, hold on a second, I'm a bit nervous. Poilin Agudat Israel. And so I think it's worthwhile to look at these rather margins of Jewish leftism that were so far not really considered in the context of leftism. And there are other aspects as gender history and also the history of emotions that played a role during this conference. And I'm very glad about the fact that these new currents of historiography played a role in this conference, even though it was a specific topic. But I think it's a sign that the various branches of historiography are interacting. Thank you.